Fred, I put this slide in here because you
Okay.
taught me a word, and I think I've almost forgot it.
Abbinamento.
Abbinamento. Tell us about that.
Abbinamento means how things pair properly, and that could be different foods or food and wine. A couple who are romantically involved, how they merge and how they become better when paired than they are on their own. And it's typical that you have cantaloupe melone, but this
Hmm.
is honeydew melon. There's
Hmm.
certain juicy fruits that go beautifully with prosciutto. Prosciutto is pork leg that is air dried for 14 months, prosciugare to dry out at length. And the sweetness and the slight saltiness and the silky texture of the prosciutto with the fleshy melon or fig,
Yeah.
it's sexy.
It is sexy. And or it must be terribly disappointing because you could get conceivably just a really bad one with bad prosciutto and bad melon.
Not
But
in Italy, they would not serve it to you. And if they do, you say, I'm sorry, this melon is hard and has no flavor. The Italians take too much pride.
that's
They
great.
really would not want to dump something on you because they feel that they have to uphold their tradition and
Yeah.
reputation.
I just love that. And you wouldn't think of some of the pairings you get and have an event. And there's another thing I put this slide in because a lot of Americans, we judge something by what we were raised with. And if you say you want a bologna sandwich, a lot of people would say,
This is
well,
no bologna. This is mortadella, which
mortadella.
is mortadella brought to the gods, is bologna brought to the gods. It is a combination of pork and pistachio and a little bit of garlic, and it's made in Bologna.
I love it.
And so bologna, that's where the name comes from. But it can be served in paper thin slices or in chunks, and it tastes differently if you eat it in chunks than if you eat it in thin slices.
So
It's
don't miss
gorgeous.
the great mortadello. It's now I want to talk about pasta. This is we've seen my daughter Jackie. This is my son Andy. He's one of our tour guides now. He's in his mid 30s now, so this is a very old shot. But he loved pasta from the very beginning. And when we think about pasta, what should we know, Fred?
Well, it reminds me that Sophia Loren said everything you see is because of spaghetti. Pasta has to be cooked al dente. Pasta can be made fresh with egg or sometimes without egg or dried, and they're both good. There's no snobism here. Certain shapes go with different foods better, but pasta should be eaten the second it lands. Sometimes a very fancy pasta will have truffle, which is what we see here, but it doesn't have to. That's cacio e pepe, a classic Roman dish,
Mhm.
and it is sheep's milk cheese, pecorino, and pepper.
Mm,
Very simple, but magnificent in
mm.
its simplicity.
That's my go-to pasta in Rome for sure. I love it. Now
Um,
this looks like game or something.
that's pappardelle, and because I see carrot, this would tell me this is from Arezzo, and that would be duck. Pappardelle
Ah,
could also be wild boar, but
huh,
the presence of carrot is usually a pairing, an
huh,
abbinamento with duck.
okay.
Yep, and those are fresh pasta.
Yeah.
That goodbye. Do never waste beautiful ingredients like squid ink by putting it into the pasta, it would dry out. You use plain white pasta and you put the squid ink as the sauce and get rid of the tomatoes. That
Okay.
would be in Venice.
Vongole.
Vongole clams. There are many types of clams throughout Italy. Do not believe what you hear that cheese and seafood don't go together. In old Venetian cookery, it's traditional to grate in a little bit of hard cheese
Hmm.
into the butter or oil that's used to cook the vongole. So you don't put the cheese on the clams, you
Yeah.
put it in the spaghetti.
Okay. Oh, this is
Pesto. My favorite, if I had to pick one, is pesto. My favorite of my cookbooks is called Recipes from Paradise, the Italian Riviera. Pesto is a magnificent sauce made in a mortar and pestle. That's where the word pestle comes from.
yeah.
And it's basil, the best basil in the world, garlic, nuts, either pine nuts or walnuts,
Mm.
Parmigiano, sometimes pecorino, and
And
Ligurian olive oil. It is divine.
now when you say Liguria, that's the region where what our favorite little corner of the Riviera, the Cinque Terre, the five
Yes.
towns. And
Yeah.
my favorite town is called Vernazza. And
That
you
looks so good.
doesn't that look great? Baby.
And
Pesto.
those are called trophie. Trophie are pasta that were invented because some woman a long time ago, not wanting to waste anything, rubbed her hands together after making pasta and these little curls came out, and she would never throw out the curls of pasta. And she discovered that trofie went better with pesto than all the other shapes of pasta.
So much fun to celebrate each region. Like when you're in the Cinque Terre, you want to try the pesto for sure, and you want to have it like the locals have it. Now, if you want
Because
to maximize,
basil that grows there is better than anywhere else. That's why.
there you go. And we'll
That's the
talk more
reason.
about that as we travel around Italy. But
Yeah.
go with each region's forte.
Now there are restaurants where, several pastas look good. And if you're traveling with friends, you could order what's called a bis or sometimes a tris. Bis is two, and where you get two different types. And there's a tris where you get two or three different types of pasta or risotto in this case. This one we're looking at is seafood, and you have different shapes of pasta plus rice. So that you can contrast. You can't do that if it's just you. But if at least one other person, you can get two half portions. If you're three people, three half portions. And that's a wonderful way to learn more about a region and what the restaurant offers if you're only there for a day or two. Now, I was talking before about the hygiene. I really meant it. Sometimes if the table is getting the same dish, they will bake the pasta, make the pasta, and a server will come out and put it on your plate that way.
So we don't really appreciate fully all of the care that goes into the serving when we're tourists coming in, but it is good to know about that and appreciate it.
Oh, and I want people to know, look at that pasta, especially what we call pasta sfoglia, in other words, and pasta ripiena, that has been filled like ravioli or annolini, which is what we see here, can often be served in broth rather than a sauce. And in Emilia Romagna, it's a capon broth with saffron. And that taste with these filled pasta is divine.
I want to remind
Extraordinary.
people, Fred is referring a lot to regions, and that's because he understands the importance of regions. And we make a point to have all 20 regions covered in the book. And each region will have its own unique cuisine, and we find that it helps.
Oh, okay. So there are more than 450 cheeses made in Italy. Italy is one of the great cheese nations of the world. And one of the greatest, and people poo-poo it until they taste it, is Gorgonzola, which is the name of a town near Milan. And in fact, it's on the Milan subway on the Green Line, appropriately. And this is a very old cheese that's stored in caves. And Gorgonzola can be eaten as is or used to melt, to put in a pasta, to put on polenta, to in some way or another combine it so you get the grainy taste plus the melting Gorgonzola. It is sublime.
Is that a case where Roquefort would be the same, but it's just from another country?
But Roquefort is not so blue or green.
Okay.
By the way, there are two types of Gorgonzola. There's dolce, sweet, and picante, which is sharper. And Roquefort is more like the picante. It's whiter. The sweet one is yellow. Oh, and there's, look, you brought it up. There is polenta. And polenta is made of cornmeal, which originated in North America, arrived in Europe, and particularly northern Italy. They would grow cornmeal, and yellow cornmeal makes polenta that goes with cheese, with meat, with heavier proteins. White polenta is served with fish, especially in the Veneto. It can be served soft, hard, cold, hot, grilled. It's very versatile because nothing goes to waste. You do not throw food out in Italy.
Aren't the people in the Veneto nicknamed the corn eaters or something like that?
No, they were nicknamed the cat eaters, but that's for a different
That's a different story. Well, but the area around Venice is popular.
The Northeast, so Friuli, Venezia, Giulia, and Veneto, and parts of Lombardy. Oh, okay. So here we're back in the cheese department. So in much of Italy, but especially the center and the south, they make mozzarella and they make ricotta. And if I had to pick one, I would say ricotta, but just barely, because I love mozzarella. But ricotta, to me, one of the best breakfasts is simply fresh ricotta of sheep, of cow, served with fresh fruit, with oranges or a fresh marmalade. It's one of the greatest things in the world.
Now we're going to get into pizza.
Okay, so mozzarella pizza. Pizza is Naples. Now, yes, all over the world we have pizza. but we know that pizza's from Naples, and it's a very simple dish. Tomatoes did not arrive in Naples until relatively late in the game. They came from the Americas. And before that, pizza in Naples was oil, a crust, and cheese, and maybe basil and herbs, and maybe a little bit of fish. Only later did the tomatoes arrive.
A lot of people wonder,
And
people brag about a oven cooked pizza or firewood oven, right?
forno a leña is what it's called. And there's something about the way the heat is generated and how the base below the crust makes it slightly crunchy and a little charred. And the pizzaiolo, the man or woman who makes pizza, sticks this sort of blade in and will twirl the pizza around, leaving it in the oven exposed to the heat. It's better than automatic, electric heating.
Naples is so famous for pizza, and I swear the pizza is particularly good in Naples. Am I just being romantic, or is there something
No,
about
it's the best I know.
Yeah,
That's
it's
it.
it's incredible, really. The pizza.
Yep. So you can get pizza with different kinds of ingredients on it. And this is Trianon. I see the napkin. So that's the famous Neapolitan pizzeria. And this one has fungi and cheese. You notice that it's not overloaded with ingredients the way American pizzas are, so that you stagger away from the table. Pizza is meant to be a whole meal for one, and it's only had at night. It's not a daytime dish. It's not eaten by the slice the way a New Yorker would do. That's a margherita. And you see relatively little ingredient, but margherita is named for Queen Margherita, who came to Naples in 1805. And they invented this pizza that had tomato, mozzarella, and basil, so the colors of the Italian flag. And that's for whom it was named. So it looks like we're starting a meal, antipasto, of different types. This, I would say, is Tuscany, because there are crostini, which are thin toasts, and they will have different toppings such as fish or spleen even, or tomatoes, or artichoke, or chopped liver. And next to that is a tagliere. Here's a word for you. Tagliere means a cutting board. And now it's pretty common in Italy, especially in wine bars, to ask for a tagliere of either meat or fish or cheese. And this cutting board has different salumi, cold cuts, and a soft cheese, probably mozzarella.
Yeah, tagliere is you see that word more often, it seems like, and that is a fun way to start a meal.
Or make a whole meal.
Or make it, sure, yeah.
Yeah. And here are different examples of crostini. So they have it with black olive, green olive, sun-dried tomato. You may have it with spleen or chopped liver. As I said, that's very typical in Tuscany.
Fred, what's the difference between bruschetta and crostini?
Bruschetta is often you take a skewer and you take a piece of day-old bread and you stick it over a flame and toast it, and then you rub it with either garlic or tomato, add some fresh olive oil, not a lot, just enough. And that's a good way that you don't let the bread go to waste. But crostini will be softer and made appositamente, in other words, at the moment. Whereas bruschetta is not to let bread go to waste.
Oh, I love a salad caprese.
So do I. So this is mozzarella, cow's milk, or it could be buffalo milk, with sliced fresh tomatoes, oregano, which we don't think of, and basil and olive oil.
Now that's popular down in the south of
Well, it's from Capri, from Campania, but it's one of the dishes that you really see all over Italy by now.
But this is a case when if you've never had good tomatoes and you have it there with your mozzarella, it's quite nice, isn't it? Oh.
That's it. Then when you come home, you don't eat tomatoes anymore.
That's the problem. It's a serious problem. So now I discovered
burrata.
Burrata, yeah, and that takes mozzarella to another level.
Oh, it takes you to the heart attack, because burrata is filled with cream, and it's divine. And it's from Puglia, which is one of the great cheese regions. And basically, you've made a mozzarella balloon, and you sort of inject rich cream into it. And then you always put a burrata in a dish, because when you cut it, it kind of spurts like a chicken Kiev with butter. But in this case, it's cream. And in America, when we get burrata, people add oil and tomatoes. Don't. Just eat the burrata.